Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. Today we're going to be doing another collab, and British Ben and American Ben are going to be helping me with this video, which will be about the 5 deadliest ships in science fiction. Now, we oftentimes compare the inner workings of a starship to some larger organism. The bridge is the brain and nerve center. It thinks for every part of the ship, while the reactor room is the heart of the vessel. It keeps it alive by pumping heat and oxygen through all the corridors so that all the crew members, like blood cells, can survive and keep the ship running. But the reality is, no matter how many analogies I make, most starships are not functioning like large organisms, but more like a large collective of individuals who are attempting to do their best to mimic a large organism. Ideally, when a captain thinks of an order, there should be no delay in the execution of that order. That's exactly what you get with a Reaper ship from the Mass Effect universe. The Reapers were an ancient alien machine race that essentially waited in her galaxy for civilization to develop and mature to such a level where they could be harvested for resources. The Reapers would hide in the cold vacuum between galaxies and reappear about every 50,000 years and descend on all of the inhabitants of the Milky Way, enslaving and killing everything in their sights. What made the Reapers so terrifying wasn't the fact that they were alien machines, it was the fact that they were gigantic space-faring alien machines, making them very different from any other ship on this list because they were in fact one large organism and they fought like one large synced-up organism. The Reapers ranged in size from 160 meters to well over 2 kilometers in length. They looked sort of like cuttlefish with several leg-like appendages hanging from their body. These ships were equipped with extremely advanced weapons technology like magneto-hydrodynamic cannons, which ejected molten metal at a fraction of the speed of light in a continuous stream that could tear through any shield and split any capital ship in half. Now, very few individuals have ever survived a trip into the interior of a Reaper ship, but there are interior corridors and spaces for an enslaved crew to operate in. The Reaper ships were separated into different categories and classes, but by far the largest Reaper was the oldest and first Reaper, Harbinger. Harbinger was the mastermind behind the entire Collector Crisis and also leads the Reaper invasion of Earth. No human or allied alien ship could hold its own in combat against the Harbinger. A normal ship staffed with organic crew will never be as quick and responsive as one fluid organism.
Hey everyone, Ben here, and today we are going to talk about what is probably the most deadly ship in the Star Trek universe, or at least that we've seen on screen. Now, before everyone goes and says, Doomsday Machine, you know, that thing that looks like an ice cream cone and shoots fire from the original series, well, that thing is never described as a ship, but instead as a machine or as a weapon. So you may think, whale probe from Star Trek 4. No, that's a probe. So what then? Well, I'm only going to be looking at vessels where we've actually seen either humans or aliens on the bridge actually commanding the ship, you know, so it is actually a ship. And what is probably the most heavily armed and deadly ship from all of Star Trek on-screen canon is the Scimitar from Star Trek Nemesis. You know, that ship commanded by Bane before he ate like 10,000 cheeseburgers and then decided to wear the most over-the-top coronavirus mask you've ever seen. Okay, so the character Tom Hardy actually plays in Nemesis is Picard's evil clone, who is a human raised by Remans and then becomes the leader of the Romulan Star Empire by assassinating the Romulan Senate. But I think if Bane built a starship, it would be something like this. Here is how they describe it in the movie.
52 disruptor banks, 27 photon torpedo bays, primary and secondary shields.
She's a predator.
That's right, a predator. And in addition to all those weapons, the Scimitar had 2 more things that made it deadly. The first is its cloaking device, which Geordi LaForge describes as perfect, since it didn't leave any clues in the form of tachyons or antiprotons, which were waste elements emitted by the ship that could give away its position. But the real pièce de résistance was that the Scimitar could fire while cloaked. Now, it wasn't the first ship to be able to do this. General Kang's Bird of Prey in Star Trek VI could do it as well, but that ship was way easier to find due to its plasma exhaust emissions. The Scimitar, on the other hand, could only be located by blindly firing off shots in all directions and scanning for shield impact, and if you were lucky enough to hit it, then you could fire again at the same spot. And even then, adolescent Bane would fire cocky one-liners back at you.
You're too slow, old man.
So even with the Enterprise E and 2 state-of-the-art Romulan warbirds going all out at it, the Scimitar wasn't really damaged at all. In the end, it was young Bane, Picard's evil clone's own mistakes that led to this. Okay, now the other really deadly weapon that the Scimitar had was a Thalaron radiation weapon that destroyed all organic matter whilst leaving other objects intact. A small version of that weapon did this to the Romulan Senate. But the one on board the Scimitar could do the same thing to an entire ship or even on a planet-wide scale. The only problem is it took 7 minutes to warm up, and you can do a lot in 7 minutes. So yeah, the Scimitar never really got to deploy its super weapon against the Enterprise or against Earth, but if it hadn't been for plot armor, basically the Scimitar would have kicked everyone's butts, and the Enterprise crew did lose Commander Data in the battle. And lastly, in case you're wondering about the size of this vessel, it wasn't actually that big. The body of the ship was 890 meters or about 3,000 feet long, only a bit longer than the Enterprise E, but its wingspan was huge, about 1,350 meters. The ship is always shown in quite dark lighting in the movie, so you don't really get a full view, but people say it looks like a bat. Alright, on to the next one.
Hello everyone, it's American Ben here to talk to you about the Amun-Ra class stealth frigate from the Expanse, a ship designed and operated by Earth-based bioweaponry company Protogen. This is not a ship that we see a lot of, which is probably indicative of its stealth prowess, but nonetheless its full capabilities are unknown. That said, it has a couple strong points that make it stand out, though I suppose that's not the best phrasing to use for a stealth ship. Anyway, what makes the Amun-Ra so fearsome to ice-hauling crews around the Sol system is that it's a ghost in the void, fitting to its name, which is derived from the eponymous Egyptian god, the word Amun meaning hidden one. When its stealth mode is activated, it does not register on any radar and remains capable of doing this until it gets within about a minute from contact with its target, which in most cases is too late for that target to respond with effective countermeasures. The Amun-Ra is a lot like a creep waiting in the bushes as you walk along at night. It's not necessarily the most powerful or well-defended ship, but it uses the element of surprise to make its physical capabilities work to its advantage. It gets in close, and while still maneuvering at high speed, launches its high-tech Black Ops breaching pods, which act as the groping hands of the Amun-Ra, latching onto their target with the intention of entering through an airlock. I should note that part of what made the Amun-Ra class so effective was its crew, which were probably made up of elite former military personnel who employed brilliant tactics to take out bigger, much more powerful ships like the MCRN Doniger, the pride of the Martian Navy. Of course, it probably didn't help that when the crew of the Doniger asked James Holden for advice on how to deal with the Amun-Ra class, given that he had encountered already, that he told them to fill the ship's fuel tank with coffee. But anyways, that's the ship. Back to you, Alan.
Now, Star Wars has no shortage in deadly ships. We have the Empire to thank for that. Whether it's the Imperial-class Star Destroyer or the Death Star, all of these space vessels were designed to create fear and obedience from the populace.
It's beautiful.
Emperor Palpatine's grand plan to control the galaxy revolved around this idea of suppression through the fear of consequences. So it's very fitting that we would choose the Emperor's own personal flagship as the deadliest ship in Star Wars. This is the little-known Eclipse-class Dreadnought. From a top-down perspective, you might mistake an Eclipse-class Dreadnought for an Executor-class Superstar Destroyer. They're both massive. The Eclipse is around 17.5 kilometers long, and the Executor is around 19 kilometers long. They're also both shaped in the classic Sith wedge, but beneath the bow of the Eclipse A massive blade-like superstructure descends, separating it in both function and appearance from the Executor. You see, the Eclipse was built to ram and cut right through enemy capital ships, but of course that was reserved for special occasions or just really hated enemies. You also had a bunch of different traditional and conventional weapons emplacements on board as well, including 550 heavy laser cannons, 500 turbo lasers, 75 ion cannons, and 100 tractor beam projectors, along with 10 gravity well projectors. The average engagement with the Eclipse was terrifying. First, it would use its gravity wells to pull ships out of FTL travel, and then it would keep them in real space. The tractor beams would pull the ship closer, then you would have all those ion cannons strip away their shields, and then the turbo lasers and the laser cannons would finish the ship off. If that didn't do the job, there were also 600 TIE fighters and 100 TIE bombers on board, along with entire legions of stormtroopers. But it doesn't even end there. The Eclipse has one last nasty surprise, and it's completely overkill, but that's what Palpatine really likes. Running along the length of the capital ship was an axial super laser, built with the same technology that was used for the Death Star. It was less powerful than a full reactor ignition from the Death Star super laser, but it was more than enough to sear the surface of a planet and make your enemies deliciously well done. The super laser was able to take out enemy ships and space stations in one shot, but more importantly, it was designed to pierce planetary shields. When the Covenant first started attacking humanity's outer colonies, we were woefully under-equipped to handle their onslaught. The Covenant had technology that was far more advanced than anything we had here on Earth. Their navy had shielded ships that could fire plasma projectiles that could burn through several decks of a UNSC frigate. Things were looking really bad for humanity, and it seemed like we were being outclassed in almost every way. But humanity did have one advantage over the Covenant. Humans are a race built on innovation. The Covenant were a coalition of aliens based on adoption. They would essentially absorb other species and take their technologies for themselves, but very little innovation or improvements were ever made by the Covenant. And since a lot of Covenant technology comes straight from the Forerunners, they would oftentimes view technology as sacred gifts from the gods. Which is why by the end of the Human Covenant War, humanity already brought their technology level up to the same level as the Covenant, if not higher. The UNSC Infinity Supercarrier was the first of her class and represented the capabilities of post-war humanity. This 5,700-meter-long ship was a combination of the best human and Covenant Forerunner technology and the largest vessel ever made by humanity. One of the ways they were able to merge so many different types of technology together was through the use of Hirogoks. These were a biomechanical race of fixer aliens created by the Forerunners to maintain all of their technology. Now, the Infinity was equipped with 4.9 meters of titanium A3 armor, and the first UNSC ship protected by energy shields. The massive repulsor engines on the ship were powered by a fusion reactor, which alone took 15 years to design, build, and test. The FTL drive was based on Forerunner technology and allowed the ship to make extremely accurate slip space jumps. For offensive power, the Infinity's primary armament is 4 27-meter bore CR3 Series 8 magnetic accelerator cannons. MAC guns were essentially gigantic railguns that fired huge projectiles at close to the speed of light. The longer and larger the railgun is, the more powerful it is, and in the earlier days of the Human Covenant War, it was very common for these railguns to run the entire length of a ship. They were basically the only weapons back then that could significantly damage a large Covenant warship's shields. The only problem with these early MAC guns was their abysmal fire rate. The Series 8 guns were an evolution of this technology. They were similar in power to the orbital super MAC guns used to defend human planets. These guns were massive and required land-based generators to power them. The Series 8 gun drew power from the Infinity's massive power plant, which was based on Forerunner technology. It also had 4 different barrels, which allowed for increased fire rates. Each round was capable of one-shotting a Covenant destroyer. In addition to the MAC guns, the Infinity had 1,100 missile pods, which could fire a variety of different munitions. You also had several different weapon systems like the Mark II 5.51 portable MAC guns, 70mm autocannon emplacements for more point defense against enemy missiles, and several Variant V Havoc nuclear warheads. The ship was basically covered completely head to toe in weaponry. There you have it, guys. 5 extremely deadly ships with very different designs. What more can you ask YouTube for? Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.